Renting is financial S side, Suicide. I don't think you can even say that word on YouTube anymore without getting flagged. I'm going to explain in this video why that is the case for most people. Not everybody, most people. And then I'll give you a breakdown of each category and how you can navigate it a little bit better. Purchasing a home has been labeled as and defined as the American dream since I don't know how long, right? Long before I was born. And it will continue probably to be that way long after I'm gone. However, due to the way that the world is going, the economy, right, wages, and many other things, for the average person right now, unless they have help from their parents or they team up, two people put joint incomes together, it's becoming more challenging, especially in the bigger cities, for the average person to purchase a home. So I want to explain why the average person, most people, should in fact buy a home. And the argument is pretty simple. All of you would agree with me that the average person out there, I'm talking about the everyday person. So this obviously won't apply to everybody. However, it's going to apply to most people. The everyday person out there isn't going for more. They're working. And again, there's nothing wrong with this, by the way. There's nothing wrong with this. They're working, coming home, kicking their feet up, watching TV or YouTube, going to sleep, rinse and repeat every day. They're not going for higher education in regards to learning applicable new skills that could potentially make them more money. They're not looking to open a business, a side business, or transition into entrepreneurship. They're not reading about investing, money multiplying, right? Dividends, stocks. Like, they may know about these things, but they're not willingly and on a daily basis, weekly or monthly basis, educating themselves, learning more, and diving into these areas. So what we're seeing is they're just going to do what they do. Come on, dude. They're just going to do what they do. And then they'll go into retirement, get their retirement, and that's it. So for the average person who falls into that bucket, that category, buying a home is going to be one of the not only best things that you can do financially, but it's also going to save your ASS in case there's an emergency. When I first moved here to Miami from California in 2021, within a couple months of being here, I purchased a personal residence, right? At the time, I was renting in California, but I said, hey, I'm going to move to Florida. I'm going to get my hands on a piece of property because normally most of my investments have been other homes that I've been an absentee owner in, meaning they're investment properties that I purchased that I rent out to other people. So by the time I moved to Florida, I already owned 5 that I rented out, but I was still renting my primary residence where I lived. And that, to the average person, that would scratch their head. I remember back then on my original YouTube channel and Instagram, people like trying to talk trash. Oh, but you rent your own house. It's like, dude, I own 5 properties, but they wouldn't get it through their head. They're like, yeah, you own other properties, but you rent where you live. It's like, dude, did you not hear what I just said? I own 5 properties, right? But again, that goes back to the average person. So I didn't get upset at that, but I understood where they were coming from because that's what we're taught. You need to buy your own house, right? So when I moved, I bought the house. Long story short, 2 years later, I decided to move. And just being in that home where I could have moved and just rented for a similar price or maybe a little bit more, because when I moved here, it made sense actually to buy. And that's one of the criterias. You have to ask yourself where you live. And I think for a lot of people outside of the major cities and major metropolitan areas, rent and what you would pay for a home, even with the lower percentage down payment, is probably the same. You're going to have some markets where renting is cheaper than buying, for sure, where you would have to put exorbitant amounts of money down, like 20% or 25 or 30% for that payment to be the same. But that's not the case everywhere. So when I moved here, I looked and I was like, well, I'm going to be paying about the same, but you know what? If I buy the home, no matter what I decide to do, which I'm unsure about, if I'll stay here permanently or maybe move somewhere else, I'll have something here that's going to be building equity. Now, fast forward, I end up selling the home about 2 years later, and I walk away with a $120,000 profit. Now, people will say, well, property taxes and down payment. Okay, let's reduce some of that. I paid 5% down at the time. I bought the home for $400,000. That's $20,000. Let's say another $5,000 in miscellaneous fees. Property taxes weren't that high. Let's say I net out of the 120. Let's say I net 80 grand. That's $80,000 that I made. And you can add up other miscellaneous things. Let's say it was 40,000 in total. Now, most of the time, property values trend up. Now, why am I bringing that up? Well, because had I rented, I wouldn't have had that profit. But let's look again at the average person that I'm talking about at the beginning of the video. They're not going to be making moves like me and purchasing property and all that. They're going to buy. And if they do, maybe once move to a bigger home, maybe. Otherwise, they're going to buy that home and then stay there forever and either will it over to their children or pass away while they're in that house. But what happens throughout life? Things that are outside of our control and emergencies happen. Therefore, if I'm that person, I have a nest egg. I have something. We know right now more than ever, Social Security, retirement for people, they're barely scraping by. But at least if you have a nest egg, and these people who stay in these homes for 10, 20, 30 years, I'm in real estate. I've sold a lot of these homes. Some of these people have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity. Even if they sold 30 years later and then rented and just sat with $500,000 or $1 million in the bank, that's awesome. Because then you could keep your meager, humble standard of living, whatever it is for you, that would satisfy you, but you have a nest egg and you have a safety net. Not only that, you have something to leave to your children potentially. You're okay and you're good. If you don't have that, and let's say a disaster happens, you get in a bad car accident, you have exorbitant medical bills, your kid gets sick and he needs to go to a specialist, something like, and then like insurance can't cover everything, then what are you going to do? You have nothing. Again, if you're the average person who's not getting into investments and doing all those things, which again, I'll reiterate, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is a very default way to make one move, which is be disciplined for a little bit to save up the money and then buy a house that long-term reaps huge benefits. I've lost count of how many people who I've done business with in real estate over the years who had a home for 20, 30, 35, 15, 25 years. And man, the amount of equity they walked away with, it just blew my mind. And they were just everyday average Joes, right? They didn't have, all these investments and all these other things. That was their main profit. And some of them sold the house and they rode off into the sunset. They rented a little apartment for them and their wife. And then they had $500,000, $1 million in the bank or whatever it was. I even proposed to them, hey, let's invest, a portion of that money into more real estate or other things that like cash flow you and make you money. They didn't even want to hear it. Some of them did, but a lot of them didn't. But I get it. They're just the everyday person, bought their home, that's it. They don't care about investing. Fair enough. If you're that person, buy the house. Then it makes sense for you. And all the little stuff and repairs, it's okay because long term, you'll have something to protect you. You'll have a nest egg. You'll have something in case of emergencies. And bottom line is you'll be okay. Period, point blank. Now, if you're like me, you're an entrepreneur, you run your own businesses, or you have a very high income, which is a small percentage of people, less than 10%, then you can play around with this. Because remember what I said in the beginning, I bought a duplex off market that I actually knocked on the door and met one of the owners because he lived in one of the units early on in my real estate career, which then I bought in a JV, a joint venture with another agent in my office. We got a good deal on it. I bought that, and then I bought 4 properties outside of Houston, Texas, in and around Houston from the tax deed auctions. I bought all those properties ever before I bought my own personal residence. Now, a lot of people aren't going to have the financial means to do that, the time, nor are they going to want to put in the effort to learn those strategies and do it. That's fine. But if you're in this category where you make the money, then it's okay. You can rent all you want, rent a studio, rent a big ballin' mansion, as long as you're being financially responsible. And then all the excess funds, you're moving it into investments and you're not drowning yourself in debt, then you're good to go. Then you're in that top 10% that can do this strategy. But for 80, 90, 95% of people, this is going to be the way to go. Don't let all this BS and, you should never buy a home. To some people, sure, that's true. But it's a lot smaller of a percentage than you think. For most people, you should buy. Like this advice, I'd give to my parents. And they followed this trajectory and they're happy. They're not worried about investing in other properties and all this stuff, right? They sold, they followed me after I moved over to Florida. They got their equity, they bought their new home virtually like 80% down. They had a nest egg, they have some money in the bank. They're traveling, they're doing their cruises. They're living the life that they want to live. Could they have moved differently? Sure. But for them, living the average lifestyle, doing the average thing, they did it right. And they're okay now. They're enjoying their retirement and having fun. I've never seen them happier because now they're not working, 40 hours a week and following that regular routine that they had to. But that's what they wanted to do, and that's what they chose. So for them, buying a home and doing the way that they did it was the way to go. And I think that's what the average person should do. If you're in the other category, maybe the 10% of people out there that may watch this video or come across it, then yeah, then make some moves. Make some moves. But make sure that if you rent, you're not being stupid. You're not doing the Instagram baller, TikToker, YouTuber lifestyle. Oh, I'm just going to rent, because that's what people thought I did. Yes, I rented where I lived and had the Lambos and all that, but I bought 5 pieces of real estate. I didn't just waste all my money on garbage. The cash flow that I was getting from all of those properties that I owned paid for the Lambo, any car payment and insurance that I had. I only really had 2 payments out of all the cars that I owned, because I owned most of them outright. But the car payments, the rent that I paid on my big home, all that was covered, and I had extra left from my investments. That's the way you're supposed to do it, where your investments fund your lifestyle. And now I've grown. My real estate operation is nationwide. I have other streams of income, right? I have stock options in my company. It just keeps growing and evolving. So I don't care if I rent. I've owned where I lived. I've rented. It doesn't matter. But I'm buying real estate and I'm investing my money. And that's the whole point here. If you're going to move like that, then you can rent. But if not, if you're in the majority and you're falling into that category, just buy the house. You have a nest egg, right? You have something that, again, over time is going to appreciate in value that you don't have to think about. You don't have to learn any special thing. Because even if you bought at a bad time, but you stayed in your house 10, 15, 20 years, guess what? Every market has its cycles, and it's going to go up in value. Look at any graph of property values over the last 30, 40 years. It goes up, down a little bit, up, down a little bit, but it just trends up. And it's always going to be worth more. And at the very least, if you sell it 10, 20, 30 years later, and then you rent, you'll have saved up maybe a couple $100,000 probably or more, and you'll be in a good place. Because then if an emergency happens, you'll be good. You'll have a nest egg. You'll have something to fall back on. Because the worst thing you want, especially as you get older in age, is to have your back against the wall financially. I've seen it just ruin people, and it's bad. So for most people, yes, buy a house and don't rent. But for that small percentage, you can rent, but be responsible and forget Instagram and social media fame. All right? If you're out there and you're watching this and you're a potential consumer, I have a nationwide team. I can connect you with local agents in your area. Reach out to me on Instagram. Leave me a comment. We can connect. If you're an agent, I have a ton of resources and training for you. Check out the newest quiz that I created, the sales quiz, which will craft a custom guide for you based on your personality type and how you are. And it'll give you a good base and your own specific custom set of questions and things that you can implement to your process to help you out. It's something new that I released, and it's really, really valuable because it's taken from a master sales book that I made for my coaching members, but I'm taking a small portion of that for this and giving it away to people for free. All right, we'll see you on the next video.